everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of The Jump Show. It's Ante-Post season. We're continuing our lead up to the Cheltenham Festival and hopefully giving you some winners once again. Thank you so much for your continued support. It means the world. We're still on that road to 1,000 subscribers. We'd love you to help out the channel by liking and subscribing. We want to hit that goal of 1,000 before the Cheltenham Festival gets underway. Right. Time to begin. First up, just want to mention, big shame, Allaho will be missing the Ryanair chase. He unfortunately had an abdominal bleed, which means he's out of the Cheltenham Festival, the two-time Ryanair chase winner, of course. And one thing screams, well, at least it should scream to Willie Mullins, is supplement haute en couleur, for the love of Pete, please, because he is tailor-made for that race. Now that Allaho's gone, surely a supplementary entry is the way forward. Yes, I know the Donnellys have got Shishkin. He runs in the Ascot Chase. He could be a Ryanair contender, but haute en couleur, see the light, Willie, and do the right thing. Right, welcome to both Jake Price and Dan Overall. Lads, hope you're well.
Oh, splendid, mate. Splendid. Listening to you beg Willie Mullins to enter a horse in a race that unbelievable. He enters him in everything and he didn't even give him an entry. So I think you really are barking up the wrong tree there. But hey, I mean, if he listens to the show, then hopefully he'll do you a solid.
Right. Section 1 this week, looking back at the weekend's action, which saw some nice performance. I didn't think there was a vintage Betfair hurdle there at Newbury, I have to say. And I thought Warwick could have been more exciting, particularly because we were denied the Love Envoy Theatre Glory clash that I think plenty were looking forward to. But we nevertheless got a good performance from Theatre Glory. And Jake, you couldn't really be helped but be impressed with that, really.
Yeah, as you said, it's unfortunate that the weekend was kind of played with the good ground, wasn't it? Lots of courses couldn't water or had their frost covers down, and the ground just is all too good. So yeah, unfortunately, we missed out on a few clashes. I think Love Envoy coming out of this race was quite a predictable move, really. But Theatre Glory, as you said, she was impressive in victory. I think a lot of people had their eye on the Coral Cup for her, and it may still end up being the case, but she's beating a 1-4-1 horse by a good distance there, and I think she's going to get hammered by the handicapper when we find out the weights. Unfortunately, we're recording this just before those updated marks come out this week, but I reckon she's going to be looking at 145 minimum, which is not impossible to win off, but it's just she would have had so much more in hand, wouldn't she, if she just finished second to Love Envoy here. So yeah, unfortunately, she may have paid way just because of the circumstances of the ground, meaning that Love Envoy has come up the race, but she's still a nice horse. Sure, if she goes to the mare's hurdle, she'd have a chance there, but we know how competitive that race is, and you just got to look at her stablemates, Epatante and Marie's Rock. So that's the type of mares that should have to be beating, and I'm not sure she's quite up to it yet, but yeah, it was a good performance and it was good to see it from her.
Yeah, I suppose in a way it's a bit of a win-win situation for her, isn't it? Because that was a nice prize to win in its own right. Like, it was, fairly prestigious for a Saturday afternoon, particularly in this country. And she's got the black type as well. I think Nicky Anderson probably views it as a win-win because he's got that under the belt. She might still go to Cheltenham, but even if she doesn't win there, she's actually won that grade 2 beforehand. So I think he'll be fairly happy. But I completely see what you're saying. Dan, what do you think?
I just echo a lot of those points to say she was very much on the Coral Cup radar. One, for Nicky Henderson's record in the race, and also the mare's record in the race is pretty astonishing. But as Jake says, that's an 11th length win over 141 rated rival. She was getting £4, so maybe it's going to be mid 140s regardless, a new mark. And as you say, wouldn't be impossible, but given she's already achieved that, a lot of the talk today at Nicky's stable tour seemed to be more towards maybe supplementing it for the mare's hurdle. And he's in a situation where he said Epatante still might go to the champion hurdle and Marie's Rock might go to the stayers. So he could end up being the yard's sole dart in that race if certain things fall into place with the others. So it'd be interesting. But if I think she was to line up there, it'd be probably a stiff enough ask really at this stage. She's still quite a young horse, still not the slickest jumper in the world at times either. And against some established top level performers, it might just be a bridge too far. But a lot to like about her. She's given Connections a decent season so far. And so I'm just ruining the fact that she's not in the Coral Cup, to be honest, because she would have been very high up on my shortlist for that.
Yeah, another handicap goes by the wayside. Now, I've got to say to you, whenever I hear your tipping, you kind of get me in a little bit of a magic daze. It's just so nice.
Oh, jeez. Superb work. Oh. Truly
And
honoured.
obviously, Magic Days was a winner at the weekend in the opera hat. I've got to say, I thought she did this really well, fair and square, beating off Dino Blue with a bit to spare. What did you think, Dan?
Yeah, no, on a day, she's very, very good. No, I remember she was one of the more talked about outsiders for the Arkle last season. I was on a preview night, and like Tom McLean were very keen about her chances. I remember fondly watching her at Punchestown because I think you and me, Jake, we were in a taxi to Paphos Airport when she won on the 2-mile handicap there in very convincing fashion. And look, as I say, on her day, going from the front over 2 miles, she's very, very effective. Obviously, there's a talk about the Mare's Chase now. That's a different task entirely, given it's 2-mile 5 on a fairly stiff course, and her general way of running wouldn't suggest that's going to be an ideal test for her. I still think 16s is reasonable enough if you're prepared to take that risk, given that the market is dominated by the top two and there is room for an each way angle in there. But whether or not she's going to be able to defy the new trip, and given her tactics, I'm not so sure. But I say beating Dino Blue, giving her weight, is a fair old effort. And I say if she was to relish a new trip, she'd be a very lively player, but I think it's a bit of an unknown.
Just on that Mare's Chase, Dan, Impervious and Allegory de Vassy, you just alluded to those two at the top of the market. Do you see it being a 2-horse race?
Oh, it's hard to look past them. Obviously, it's one of those where you're always trying to looking for the new blood in that race. We had Ellie May, who was there for a couple of years, but she doesn't really seem to be at that level anymore. Impervious has been very impressive in what she's done. Allegory de Vassy could be anything really. In an ideal world, she'd be running against the Geldings. But 2-horse race, maybe there is room in that race for an each way play, given the way the race might cut up on the day. But for win purposes, it is probably quite difficult to look past those two currently.
Yeah, I think so as well. Jake, what do you think about Magic Days and how she kind of compares to the other mares who are going chasing this season?
Yeah, well, in a bit of a theme so far on this podcast, I did have Magic Days on my radar as like a Grand Annual type horse. I thought that 2 miles is kind of her trip, and I thought she showed that here. I wouldn't be so keen on her stepping up in trip to the Mare's Chase. Obviously, she's still unexposed over that, and she could potentially grow into it. But I thought it was a good performance to beat Dino Blue, giving away. Obviously, Dino Blue was conceding the experience being a novice, but I thought it was good. I don't think Dino Blue would be quite up to a Mare's Chase this year either, but I think she could be one that develops into that next year with the more experience she gets. So yeah, I definitely have Dino Blue in the back of my mind for something next year, but maybe not this year. And then Ellie May, she suffered quite a setback in the middle of the winter, according to connections. So they're on a bit of a revival mission with this one, rather than trying to win the race like they normally are, the Opera Hat. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how she bounces out of it. I think she is like 33-1 for the Mare's Chase, which for last year's winner is not the worst thing in the world. I'd definitely be trying to find a non-runner no bet price if you were going to go and back her. But if they could get her back to something like her best, then she would definitely have a chance as well. But obviously on that running, it looks like they've got a lot to work on, that's for sure.
Yeah, a long road back for her, I think. Not a long road back, though, for one who is most certainly on the upward trajectory that we so often see from Willie Mullins' novices, and that is Hunter's Yarn. Simon Munir and Isaac Swade in the double green had a horse who I would argue before this campaign I wouldn't really have even considered to be a contender for the likes of the Supreme Novices Hurdle, but he was very emphatic. He did it very authoritatively at the weekend at Navan in listed company, and saw off some decent types in behind, possibly handicappers, but there was no denying it was visually a very taking effort. Interested to see what you make of it, Jake.
Yeah, the race was a bit of a strange one, to be honest with you, because we obviously had American Mike in there, who was supposed to run in Nathaniel Lacey, and then never ended up getting to a run there. So he was stepping back in trip from where they wanted to run him over 2 miles 6. He had to drop back all the way to 2 miles, which I don't think was ever going to be his sort of trip, was it? And then the other two horses, Imagine, and I know the way you're thinking. I think they've always had handicaps in mind, and they were trying to get their 4th runs in. So I think Hunter's Yarn was really, realistically, the only horse who actually really wanted to go and win the race, and he did that in good style. I thought it was a nice performance from him. But I think you're definitely going to be looking at the handicappers in behind as to the horses to take out the race, because Hunter's Yarn, that they're talking about the Supreme with him. He got a rating of 143 in Ireland. That's all, that's all fine. But the two horses behind, Imagine, who finished second, he ran a good race. He's been left on a mark of 135. And then I know the way you're thinking. Obviously, he was a very, very eye-catching runner who stayed on late in the day for third. We know how these JP horses are campaigned. We know that they're going to have handicaps in mind. And seemingly the Martin Pipe is his next destination, which would make sense. The only thing I would say, though, is that he's been left on that mark of 137 and Imagine, respectively, on 135 in Ireland. But I think the BHA might have a bit more of a dim view on that. I think we're going to be looking at, towards the harsher end of the scale of the British tax, as we call it, going into the festival. So I would anticipate about £7 for both of them, to be honest. Which may put them towards the top of the weights in their respective races, but clearly they're nice horses and ones that will be firmly on people's radars for festival handicaps.
Yeah, you make a very interesting point there about the British handicapper going, but perhaps more being less lenient and being a little bit harsher. I think that will happen as well, actually, I have to say, having watched the race back. Dan, Hunter's Yarn, a potential Grade 1 performance, do you think?
I think that might be a stretch at this time, based on what he's achieved, realistically speaking. He's clearly a decent enough type, very sharp 2-mile type, and there's things you can like about him, but I think going up to a Supreme, even an open-ish looking renewal like this one, would probably be a stretch at this time. Like, it was a fairly slowly run race. The time was slower than the first main hurdle on the card that Firm Footings won, and I guess he'd probably be towards the mid-end of the scale for the Gordon Elliott team as a novice hurdler. He might end up being a pipe horse as well, but he wouldn't be one of their standouts. So, as you say, there's a few questionable runners in behind in terms of what actually has been achieved. On that, I know where you're thinking. It's just absolutely ludicrous, isn't it? Like, everyone thought the exact same thing, and as soon as I checked what the price he was immediately 7-1 for the pipe. I'm just like, well, it's just so predictable. It's just so predictable.
So obvious.
It's just like, yeah, and it's even more brilliant, I guess, because this happened with, I think it was the half brother. I like the way you're thinking, like 2 years ago. I think he went off about 13-2 for the pipe as well, in basically the exact same fashion. I think he only finished 8th in the end, but I say that bloodline of the way you're thinking horses is just causing handicap controversy wherever they go. Absolutely outrageous behavior, but that's the way it goes. And look, if he's 7 for the pipe, if you want to get stuck in that, fill your boots. It wouldn't be anything I'd be interested in at this stage, but the Hunter's Yarn, I think, will probably just be more making up the numbers in a Supreme rather than contending, would be my guess at this stage.
Interesting thoughts from you both on that race at Navan. The Boyne Hurdle, we've got to come on to that, because I have to say, I've always been a huge fan of Blazing Cow, and I was a little bit concerned. He was 5-1 at the off for this race, and I thought if he was going to win, he'd probably be a bit shorter than that. Clearly, there's work to be done with him in terms of getting him fit and 100% right. So the fact that he still managed to absolutely bolt in the Boyne suggests to me we're talking about an extremely talented stayer. And in a contest stayers hurdle, it is likely to be pretty weak, I would say, or at least there isn't a huge amount of strength in depth. He's blazed right into it, hasn't he? Dan, what do you think of him?
Yeah, as you say, this ever-evolving shape of this race. 2 weeks ago, we were probably looking at a scenario where Blazing Cow and Flooring Porter both don't run, and now it looks like they both probably will. Just goes to show you how this race ebbs and flows every single week. We come on here, we end up having to talk about it because something inevitably changes. But like you, Tom, I've always been a big Blazing Cow fan. I thought he was the outstanding staying novice hurdler of last season. Obviously, the issue has been we've just had so many questions about his well-being. It seems to have ebbed and flowed like it for the whole season. And again, I think the market vibes here told you the story that I don't think he would have been fully ready for that. Like, no, you couldn't give him away towards the off. Obviously, he was conceding weight as well, but on what we knew, like, he was going to be, if he was primed, tough to beat there. But to be fair, I think if you backed him, you were never really too worried. Like, I know he was ridden patiently. He did what he did as a novice hurdler, and he didn't jump a few with much fluency, but I think that's just him. He's never really shown the greatest of respect for his hurdles, but turning the bend, you could just see him. He turned out wide, just traveling like a dream, and obviously in between the third last and the last under hands and heels, he surged to the front, and in the end idled a bit out in front, but was always doing enough to beat meet and greet. Obviously that form ties in with Home by the Lee, obviously giving him £5. I think Home by the Lee beat him by about the same distance off levels. So again, if you're looking for collateral form, it would be a big positive. And look, he's clearly a seriously talented horse. He's the one who's going to arrive as still very unexposed on an upward curve. And again, like Charles Burns, you probably more associated in these days as just looking for handicap plots, but he's one hell of an operator when he has to be. Obviously, I remember Solwit, I think he brought back from a 2-year absence. Obviously, then had a couple of runs and then won the Stayers. I think like back in 2013. Like he's got a knack with these horses and he's able to do it. And he's clearly just been minding Blazing Cow because he knows what he's got there. And I say we're looking at a very, very live contender for the Stayers. And it's making Tia Hooper look a bit more questionable now, Jake.
Yeah, what say you, Jake?
Yeah, no, it was very impressive from Blazing Cow. As you know, most people, I assumed that he would need that run, which obviously his SP of 5-1, you know, makes clear. But there was a bit of money from him from connections apparently. He was out to 8s on the exchange and then got backed in a little bit before the off, so they had a little bit of confidence clearly. But yeah, it was a very nice performance. He's going to improve for stepping up back up to 3 miles. He's got great chances. I mean, there's not much more I need to add on top of what Dan said. I think the concentration now for connections will just be getting there in one piece and hope they can get the job done.
Yeah, we all hope he's going to be able to get there in one piece, don't we? It'd be great to see him take part in that Stayers hurdle. Let's move on to Churchstone Warrior, and the 10-up novice chase got the better of Marla Mission. I have to say, this wasn't the speediest of finishes we saw all weekend. It was kind of like watching one of those old black and white slow motion films. But in the end, Churchstone Warrior did get across the line in front and did it very well indeed. Very tough, very tenacious for a game. Jake, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I thought it was a good little race. I was kind of confused to see Marla Mission in it, to be honest. I thought they'd just leave him to Cheltenham now. So yeah, that was my first thoughts. But then Marla Mission obviously went around, jumped really well. I think he pinged pretty much every fence, to be honest. And then Churchstone Warrior, and then Churchstone Warrior just kind of he doesn't jump that fluently at times, especially towards the early part of the race. But as he gets into the race, he does warm to his task a bit more, and he's clearly just got stamina in abundance because he managed to battle all the way down the straight and get up and win by 3/4 of a length. So yeah, it was a good performance. He's definitely on my national hunt chase radar now, especially as the connections of Marla Mission seem a little bit less keen on going to the race. I'm not saying they're not going to go, but it's gone from definite to maybe, I think is kind of the vibes that I'm getting. So yeah, that would be a slight concern in terms of his participation. But yeah, I thought both horses ran really well, but the eye catcher clearly was the horse in third, Flanking Maneuver. Hasn't been seen since finishing, I think it was 4th behind Bob Ollinger in the Lawlers and Naas, 700 and something days off, and he's absolutely stormed home for third. I'd imagine they'll just keep in these graded novice chases for the rest of the season now. If he wins one, great. If he doesn't, novice for next season. But yeah, he's clearly a horse with tremendous potential to be a good staying chaser in the future.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Flanking Maneuver was a ridiculously impressive comeback back in third. He travelled all of them, and I think he just felt it, didn't he, towards the end, Dan?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, and as Jake said, if they're probably just going to look to, it's one of those situations. You win a grade 1 or a grade 2 novice chase, then great. If not, you've got a nice novice for next season. I imagine, I don't know when the market will come out, but if there's the National Hunt Chase market for 2024, you'll probably be towards the top of it straight away. And it'll probably be like 4-1, knowing the way these things get priced up as well. Sad, but true. But it was, Churchstone Warrior deserved a race. Like, even if you go back towards the late end of his hurdles, time over hurdles, he was just always bumping into good horses and just always finishing second or third. And a race was always going to fall his way eventually. I'm just annoyed it was this one. But in the end, he deserved it, to be fair. He did get taken off his feet slightly at the start. He was out jumped, but I think once they decided, or Aide-de-Camp decided to settle him in behind the pace and not force it, I think he did start to pick things up. But realistically speaking, all this is kind of confirmed is that if Guy de Menil does go to this race, he's going to absolutely bolt up and nothing will get near him because it's just a class above and there's nothing really in this race that can challenge him. Like, I'm not having this Mr. Coffee talk, just impossible, not happening. Like, I refuse to back him for any race whatsoever. And there's just nothing else in there. It was Marla Mission or nothing, and now it's nothing.
It's painful, isn't it, really? I mean, I honestly thought this is exactly the race just to take on Gardemini. And there must be something we can take him on with. And I was obviously going to say Hidden Heroics is the one, but Dan has come out and said he's not even going to run in the race. I can hear the eyes coming from next door. Oh, they are. They're all chuffed he's not running, which is really nice of them. Yeah, Guardian Mini, it looks good for him, doesn't it? I have to say. I'm afraid I've been chronologically all over the place with the review in this week's section. 2 races we still need to cover. One of them came on Saturday at Newbury. That was, of course, the Betfair Hurdle, the big race of the weekend. And Auchenrisk got the better of Filey Bay. That was a really good finish. And once again, Dan, it shows that in that race, it just pays to be up with the pace.
Well, especially on ground that was almost like concrete, and every track record under the sun seemed to get broken. Like it is, but I tell you what, Auchenrisk is probably, if not my favorite, one of my favorite horses in training. Like he's just so likable. His attitude is second to none. Like he'll do anything for you, if it's hurdles or fences. Like he just gives his all absolutely every time. And fair play to Connections. Obviously, they've been spending a lot of their time over the fences this season. Took advantage of that £7 lower mark, and I mean the pair pulled 10, 11 lengths clear of the remainder. So it seemed to be a very good performance. See, Filey Bay remains of interest going forward. Just never really, I thought, looked like getting there after the error 2 out. And I think Auchenrisk is, unless you've got a bit up your sleeve, it's not a horse you're going to pass easily, even if you try and go to the other side of the course to do so. He's just kind of got that attitude going for him. So fair play to Chris Gordon. Been a great season for him. Be interesting to see him in a Grand Annual now. Obviously, a higher mark over fences. I'm not convinced he's as good a chaser, to be honest. I think his size is always going to slightly hold him back. He isn't the biggest type in the world, but given his run style and given his attitude, I still think he'll be bang there in a Grand Annual. Like he'll give you his running. That's one thing you can be assured of. And there may be 1 or 2 that have a few pounds in hand ahead of him, but I definitely see him hitting the frame in that. He's just that kind of horse who always will give his race for you.
Yeah, he's as tough as they come, isn't he? Jake, you can't really not be impressed with the way that he finds at the end of his races.
Yeah, he's a very likable type, as Dan just said. And it's very, very interesting that, they're now going to go back to the Grand Annual. Obviously, it's a great prep for them to come back over hurdles. The chase mark shouldn't get affected for that. So, yeah, off 145, I think he'll have a decent chance. And he'll, as Dan said, he'll definitely run his race. It's just whether he bumped into anything that's a bit better handicapped. But, he'll definitely be there or thereabouts. In terms of Filey Bay, he's actually gone up £6 in Ireland now. So he's up to a mark of 137. So I think, I'm not saying he's blown his mark in terms of being able to win a race like this, but in a county where he's going to be up probably another couple more pounds on top of that from the BHA, I don't know. I don't think I see him getting his head in front. I think this was his chance to win a race, a big pot like this. And unfortunately, he found one too good. So yeah, I'd probably not put a line through him, but I'd be more cautious with Filey Bay going forward.
Okay, very interesting stuff. One more race to talk about from the weekend. That was Lucia, obviously very impressive in a race that, for my money, fell apart completely. Lallygag, very disappointing, ran below form, and nothing really in behind was of much ability in terms, or at least compared to Lucia. Supreme or Mares Novice has been talked about. I'd be very surprised, actually, if Nicky didn't go for the Mares Novice. I don't really see the point of going for the Supreme because the Mares Novice itself looks pretty competitive, and so does the Supreme. So, Mares Novice is almost certainly going to be a little bit easier. Jake, what do you think she's going to do, and how impressed were you?
Look, it was a very impressive performance in terms of the way that she travelled through it. But again, she's beaten nothing really, has she? There's no horse in there that you'd be scared about in a Supreme or any type of Cheltenham race, to be honest. So, look, I think we knew going into the race that she was the odds-on favourite for a reason, and we were expecting a performance like that. She jumped pretty well for the main, obviously, other than the last where she got it all wrong. But she never looked like coming down or unshipping or anything like that. So, just an untidy jump, really. Look, she's clearly a very, very good horse. Nico de Boinville was talking about the Supreme. Nicky Henderson has said the Mares Novice, so it'll be the Mares Novice, wouldn't it? So that's kind of how these things work. And as you said, it makes sense to run there. If they had something else for the Mares Novice that was up there at the top of the whole market, then obviously it would make a bit more sense to split them up. But he doesn't, by all accounts. So
they got a horse with no name.
A horse with no name. Yeah, I think she was about 50 to 1 or something. I heard earlier, but yeah, no, I would say that it'll be the Mares Novice for her, and obviously she'll be a danger to all of them. But she hasn't met anything of the caliber of an Ashra Diamond yet, so it should be an informing race, that's for sure.
You can imagine that Nico just got off Lucia and was adrenaline pumping, was like, "Oh, we got to go to the Supreme. That felt amazing." And Nicky's just like, "Hold your horses, Nico. Hold your horses."
Yeah.
But nonetheless, yeah, you couldn't help but be impressed, could you, Dan?
Oh, she's very good. She is very, very good. I know that race fell apart. You're right. Like Western Zephyr's another one. Like it was him and Lallygag were the only horses that really brought any form into that race, and they both basically fell out the back of the TV approaching 3 out. So they didn't run their races. But God, she's good. I really like her. Like, I'd love to see her in a Supreme. I really would, because I think she'd actually have a decent chance. I think she is a caliber of mare that it would take a good one to give £7 to. But I checked the market, said I couldn't quite believe she was as short as 6-4 for the Mares Novice, given that I say it's normally a race that's got minimum 15, 16 runners in it. So like 6-4 now, Ante-Post is pretty outrageous. I know she's good, but I think people will be keen to grab what she's achieved, like Jake has just done, and I can see that getting maybe a tad bigger towards the day, and maybe getting 7-4, 2-1, especially because we've got likes of Ashro Diamond, who has proven form against Grade 1 horses in Ireland. So I would not be in a rush to lump in at 6-4, but to be fair, we've also seen like in the past hot favourites in this race bomb out as well. But I do like her. I think she'll take some beating at Cheltenham if she gets there fit and well.
Yeah, fingers crossed she does. Right, some news to bring you. Brandy Love has been sold, now owned by the Donnellys. A Dream to Share has also been sold, but the JP McManus. So there's 2 notable acquisitions. Mark Walsh, injured for 3 to 4 weeks. Bit of a shame for him. Hopefully his recovery will be speedy. And some very good news. Gold Tweet is to be supplemented for the Stayers Hurdle. Excellent stuff. Or should I say, bien joué to the French contingent watching this video, which I'm sure there is no one.
1 or 2.
Maybe 1 or 2. 1 or 2, potentiellement. Right. Let's move on to, actually, Jake has called this the brutally honest Jonbon review, which inclines or infers the fact that Jake is going to be saying something fairly negative about Jonbon, but I'm going to start with something fairly positive. Or actually, I'm going to start with something. Actually, what I'm going to start with is by saying I couldn't make head nor tail of the performance, and I tried to watch it afterwards. I just couldn't understand what had happened in that race. But was it 4 out, 5 out, down the back straight at the end of the back straight? I thought Aidan was going to pull him up. And then he didn't pull him up, and then he kind of really rode him around the bend, and I thought, here we go, he's going to come and win easily. And then he actually had to battle against Calico. I couldn't make head and tail of it, but what I did like was, because I tweeted beforehand, actually, that I thought this is going to be a complete walk in the park. It's going to be no sort of race whatsoever. What Jonbon needs is experience. Actually, I think he will have learnt a fair bit from that race after all. So in that regard, I would definitely take the positive out of it. Now, El Fabiolo was more impressive visually, of course, at Dublin, and he beat better horses. So I think he very much deserves to be at the top of the market. But I don't think Jonbon is beaten just yet. He likes a battle. He's still got plenty of ability, and I wouldn't be writing him off, despite the fact I think El Fabiolo probably holds the aces now. Jake, what do you think of it?
Yeah, well, coming into this weekend, I was very much of the opinion that El Fabiolo should be the favourite. That Irish Arkle form is, there for everyone to see. He's beaten good horses and he's beaten them well. And look, I've been trying to take on Jonbon all season in terms of for the Arkle, not each race that he runs in, but I think he was a very short price after his debut, as most of these novice chasers are these days. But he was always one I was going to try and take on, and look, he's obviously done nothing here to make me be scared of taking him on. That's for sure. Look, it was as you said, it was good to see him have a bit of a battle in terms of getting that experience into him. We know he still jumps well. We know now that he can get his head down and win a race, but he's beaten Calico. He's rated 136. Dysart Dynamo would even beat Calico by about 100 lengths, I reckon. I think it's a terrible piece of form. I don't think Calico's improved. I think that it's just Jonbon he's just ran to below par, really. I definitely would be still against him. There's nothing that has changed that. Clearly, he has a good chance in the Arkle. I'm not saying he can't win the Arkle. Obviously, he can still win the Arkle. But I just, really didn't like it. I thought that that you'd want to go and see him just absolutely bolt up on the bridle, and especially when it came down to that match race, as you said, in the morning, you look at that and you go, bloody hell, Jonbon, he's going to have a match race to try and get as his Arkle prep. Like, I think people would have been picking holes in it, even if he did go and win by 20 lengths on the bridle. So, not for me as a horse. I've never really liked him that much, and I was glad to see him drift out, to be honest, because I think that bookmakers obviously these days they're too easy just to leave them at the same price if they don't run well, rather than actually drift them out and correct the market with El Fabiolo going into favoritism. So it was good to see that, at least.
A brutally honest Jonbon review indeed there from Jake. Dan, are you in the same camp as Jake, or are you slightly more taken?
It was a weird one because I was at the West Ham game when this was live, and so I didn't see it all. I just kind of saw all the fallout, and most of the tweets I was said were basically just confirming that El Fabiolo has already won the Arkle. So I'd already kind of had that in my mind when I came to actually watch the race fully. It was just very strange. I guess if you're going to be on the positive side, you'd say that he was pretty workmanlike in the Rossington Main as for his Supreme prep last season. Obviously, a lot picked holes in that as well. Obviously, ground probably would have been on the quick side for him. I don't think he would have really wanted it rattling fast. And given previous history, it's probably a bit surprising Nicky didn't pull him out. But it was just a bit of a strange one. Like, once he got headed and once that move by Calico was made, like all of a sudden, this fluid jumping that we're used to just seemed to go disappear. But I didn't think he jumped well at all down the back. He was so more notably out to his right, which he has tended to do anyway as his like automatic way of correcting himself. But it was notably more to the right as soon as he got headed. Now that would be a big concern for me. Like obviously it raises questions about how he's going to be ridden. Obviously so far in his chasing career, he's basically had to make all in most instances because he's been so far superior and there's been nothing else really willing to go a pace that he would prefer. But obviously, once he got headed, then it was just his jumping just didn't seem the same. But then do you go to an Arkle and try and repeat last year's Supreme and take on Dysart Dynamo at the head of affairs? Like, surely that can't be a good idea either. So it really just raises a few questions of him now. Like I say, I didn't think there'd be many more impressive, like chasing debutants in the way he really managed his fences against Monmoral. But all of a sudden, what seemed to be his greatest weapon now is a slight question mark for me. Like we said last week that El Fabiolo should be the favourite for the Arkle anyway, because regardless of what Jonbon was going to do here, he wouldn't have achieved anything like El Fabiolo would have achieved in the build-up. So the market is now in the correct position. It's one of those, I really wouldn't be in a rush to back Jonbon now either. There's still potential there, but there's far more questions now than there previously were. And realistically speaking, it's only drifted out, like half a point in price? Like, that's still not enough compensation for me, given that we have more questions than we did previously.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point, actually, about his jumping, I have to say. Remains to be seen, doesn't it? If he can bring enough of a big gun and beat off El Fabiolo in the Arkle. And, of course, there are other horses in it as well, not just those two. Right, last section this week is, of course, the Ante-Post Selections for Cheltenham. No show from you this week, Dan.
No, I racked my brain. I got a horse priced up in the Kingmaker, and I was reasonably keen, even though we haven't seen him since November. It's Volcano, for people who are wondering. I'm not backing because I can only get 14's number on no bet, and it's just not worth it at that price. So I'm sitting this one out, and hopefully back next week with something I actually have some enthusiasm about.
Yeah, you know, it's always the sign of a true judge. If they don't fancy anything, they will not just put one up for the sake of it. So respect. Jake, what about you this week?
Yeah, unfortunately, if you would request a bet now for the Kingmaker, they're just putting it in at 10-1, 14-1, no matter what the horse is. So yeah, don't even bother until we get some entries and they actually get the full field. But if we move on, yeah, I'm going for the County Hurdle this week. And it's a horse that ran absolutely deplorably on the weekend, but I think you can just put a line through it. So it's going to be Icar Allen for Willie Mullins. Obviously, he ran in the Betfair Hurdle. And it was a strange one, really, because last weekend he was second favourite, about 7-2 for the Liffey handicap hurdle that obviously Gaelic Warrior went and won. And Connections obviously decided they're going to go for the Betfair Hurdle instead, which is absolutely fine, no problems for me. But then it came to the Monday and Newbury put out this notice that there's going to be good to firm in the description. And I thought at that point, there's just absolutely no chance they're going to run him, is there? But they did. And despite drifting out to, I think it was about 40 on the exchange just before the declarations, he was a runner. John Joe O'Neill rode him. And yeah, straight away he was back into 15-2 for the race when the market reformed upon declarations. So despite two non-runners, however, he drifted out to 12-1 before the off. So that was his SP, 12-1, despite Hacker to Places, who was about 8-1 in the market coming out, which says all you need to know, especially as Farley Bay went off the 4-1 favourite for JB McManus himself. So clearly they didn't fancy him in terms of winning on Saturday. And look, he just plodded round. There was never a point where he even got into the race. He was always around the back. Jonbon never really touched him, and he just plodded on the last of the finishes. I read the steward report. They did obviously ask some questions about that. The trainer's representative just said that the ground was too quick. So look, I'm just going to put a line completely through that, just completely ignore it. I think they just needed to get a run into him. I think that's the only reason that Woolley would have run him. They needed to get a run in before Cheltenham, so that's what they've done. But if you look through his form, like it's just, he has such a nice profile for the county hurdle. I mean, last season, obviously, he was fourth in the Triumph, which was a really good run. He had, Vauban obviously went and won that. He was only beaten 7 lengths in fourth, and he had Ante-Post back behind him as well. So that course and distance form is brilliant. And then obviously last season, he also won a Grade 3 juvenile hurdle at Fairyhouse just before the festival. And this season, he ran a very, very eye-catching race in the Grade A handicap hurdle at Fairyhouse in December. So it's on Hutton's Grace Day, and he just absolutely tanked into the race, but without Paul Townend really touching him. Came through the field, finished third without really being given a tough time. That was off a mark of 140, so he got a mark of 146 for Newbury. But I think he'll be probably dropped a couple of pounds for that now, to be honest. But obviously, I don't see how the handicapper can really do much other than he could leave him, I guess. But I'd hazard a guess at least £1 drop, which would be nice and handy for the county hurdle, which hopefully will be run on a lot softer ground than Good to Firm in the description. Else we'll be having all sorts of havoc. But yeah, so I think it's just been an overreaction. He's now up to 25 to 1 non-running a bet, which I think is a great price. Willie's done it before, where he's ran the horse in the Betfair hurdle, and they've gone on to run well at Cheltenham. So you've had Wicklow Brave, who even did it, and he finished 11th, and then went and won it. So I know the comparisons there. Dan is very happy.
No, we're not. Do not compare Kari Allen to Wicklow.
Hey, he's achieved more.
Brave. That's offensive.
He's achieved
well,
more.
Let's see where he's at the end of his career, shall we?
Yeah, I'd guess he's not that good, but there's also some other horses that have run well. Ran pretty badly in the Betfair hurdle, and then gone on to finish better at Cheltenham Festival, such as Smashing and Blazer as well, who both went in the Coral Cup actually. So there is an angle where you could say that Ike Allen could go to the Coral Cup, but I think it would be the county for him. And yeah, 25 to 1. To forgive one bad run, I think that's a fair price. So he'll be my selection this week.
Right, this week I am going to put up, so much the humour of quite a few people I've already spoken to. A lot of people laughing for this one. But I'm going to go with Nube Negra for the champion chase each way. Hear the groans of my housemate.
That was a great sound effect. Did we get that replayed?
That wasn't me putting that on. They are genuinely furious about the selection. I've got plenty of reasoning behind this, I have to say. Now, look, this is a horse. Yeah, I mean, this is a horse that I've always had a soft spot for, so that might be coming slightly into my psyche when I'm thinking about this. But I do think he is a little bit underrated in the market here, particularly bearing in mind this race has started to fall apart ever so slightly. We saw Energumen disappointing at Cheltenham in the Clarence House. We saw Edwardstone, who couldn't get by Editor du Gite. That was a bit of a surprise. We've seen Blue Lord very disappointing in Dublin. Gentleman to Me won that race, but he kind of fell apart that race as well, didn't it, really? And then that leaves Nube Negra next in the market. And I think he's a big price at around about 25 to 1. He's coming here fresh, which is very important. He always runs his best races fresh, or rather, he doesn't really run any sort of race when he's not fresh. So the fact that he's fresh is a good sign. The ground's going to be quick, which is going to suit him down to the ground. But the one thing that I'm really banking on in this contest is there's going to be a very strong pace, which he can sit off and come through. And hopefully the likes of Editor du Gite, Gentleman to Me, and particularly Energumen are going to go forward. And I think Energumen will go forward because those tactics when he was midfield last time, they didn't really work. And I think he's seen to a best effect when he can use that long galloping stride. Now, Gentleman to Me and Editor du Gite in particular are going to want to lead. So I have a feeling this could turn into a potential burn-up between those three. And Funambule Civil doesn't mind sitting off it as well. So for me, the two who are going to come and be played late are Edwardstone and Nube Negra. And I wouldn't have a huge amount between differential in the prices. Obviously, Edwardstone is a better horse. So we've seen that this season. But Nube Negra is a former second in this race. I still think he retains plenty of ability, even though you might not think it when you saw him at Kempton behind Editor de Jeep. But nothing really went right for him in that race. He was caught out wide. He was held up too far off the pace. And when he tried to close, it was too little too late. And I think he's definitely worth it. Looking back through his results of last season, he was beaten 12 lengths by Grenadine in the Tingle Creek, and that came way too soon after his victory in the Schlur Chase. He's a bit of a quirky customer because he does need to be fresh, as I say. And then his run in the Celebration Chase when 15 lengths behind Grenadine. He didn't jump very well at all, and I think that really cost him in the closing stages. But he got a nice confidence boost in that 3-1 at Schlur, which obviously was a complete no mark of a race. He won at 10-1 on, was never challenged at all, which I'm very happy with because he needed that confidence boost, I think. And Lowe was beaten second last time out of the Dujita. As I say, that one got first run, and Nube Negra was held up too far off the pace. I think this race is going to suit him a lot better. We know that he really likes Cheltenham, has run some very good races here in the past. And at his best, he's very capable of mixing it with the likes of these horses in this race. I just think 25-1 could be too big. And I can easily see him either running to a place or maybe challenging for the victory if they go too fast up front. So that's my thinking behind it. Hopefully, I won't have egg on my face come Cheltenham. But hopefully, this could be the one Grade 1. He's had 6 attempts at it so far and hasn't managed to win. So this is going to be the one that Nube Negra comes home in front.
You know what? I quite enjoyed the pace breakdown. I quite enjoy that part of it. And let's be fair as well. This race hasn't exactly been always plain sailing for the short price favourites, has it? It wouldn't be the first year we've had a shock. But my God, you'll be the only one chucking paper up in the air if he wins. I tell you now, it would be easy to spot you in the crowd of 80,000 if he wins. My God.
Well, do you know what? I was thinking about putting Champ Carley up in the Ballymore, but I thought, you know what, Tom, let's just go out on a limb and have a go at it. It's a big price. He's a big old price. You know, why not? So
Tom, are you going to be there on the Wednesday?
I'm hoping to be, yeah. I'm definitely there on the Tuesday, but hoping to be there on the Wednesday.
Because after Nube Negra wins, the drinks will be on you for the rest of the night.
Yeah. That is the aim.
Were you drinking tap water then?
Dan's just sitting there laughing. Jake doesn't know what to make of it, but could be the most outlandish selection ever seen on the Jump Show. But you know what? That's what we're here for, isn't it?
And we've had some bad ones.
You never know, though. You never know. Chaps, thanks very much indeed. A lot of fun this week. Do remember to like and subscribe to the channel on social media as well. Make sure you like the video on YouTube and do comment with your latest Ante-Post bet for the Cheltenham Festival. Gents, been a pleasure. Thanks very much.
As always, my friend. Always a pleasure to laugh at you, Tom.
Plenty more laughing to come in the rest of the episode of the Jump Show, I'm sure, particularly for selections like that one. But yeah, we'll see you very soon.